Wait, should I? 1 second. Can I? 1 second. Let me do that. Okay. Hey, sure. Can I? How do I do that? Okay. No! Okay. Okay. 5 years. It took me 5 years to finally watch both Across the Spider-Verse, Into the Spider-Verse. Don't ask me why, I just couldn't be asked. That doesn't mean that I hated the film. I really did love it. I really adored the art style and the reception it was getting. And because I was seeing the reception it was getting, something in my head was turning like, you like this film, despite me not even watching it. So I was just vicariously living through everyone else's adoration for the film without me actually watching it. And that was then again repeated when Across the Spider-Verse came out, because again, people loved the film and I decided to draw some of the characters from there. And in one of the captions, I must have said about Miguel being a dickhead and how, I don't know, he must have been my favorite character or something. And I was like, I haven't watched the first film or the second film. And then they were begging me to watch it, so I eventually caved in and I watched it. I will say I didn't go into the film blind, because for some reason when I don't end up watching stuff, I just look at spoilers. So I knew what was happening in the first film and I already knew what was going to happen in the second film. I just hadn't seen it like put together and had like the full context of it. So when I did watch it, it pieced things together for me and I really did like it. And it kind of made me think a lot and theorize. So I watched the film knowing they were foreshadowing events in the second film. So when I watched this film, I kept my eye out to look for stuff that might be like hinting towards things in the third film. And these are basically like my notes and stuff that I think mean something. Things that I picked up on was Miguel's like insistent like need to keep the multiverse intact and his like persistentness on like the canon events and how like important they are. And we see like one of them come to fruition, one of them being ASM 90, which is, I think, a police captain dies saving a child in a fight where Spider-Man is like fighting with his nemesis, something like that. And we see that in Mumbattan. But I don't understand why it happens, because it's not supposed to happen with Miles on the spot there. Because in my mind, like how Miguel says it, is that all of these canon events happen in the world, specifically to that Spider-Man with things of his world. So with Mumbattan, the fight would happen with Pavita, with his nemesis, with the police captain Singh and the child. All of those things are specific to the Spider-Person and their universe. But Miles and Spot aren't of that universe. They're not from there. They're from 1610. But the canon event triggered because they were the Spider-Man and the Nemesis, and then Pavita's Captain Singh and the child were there. But those two things aren't linked together. They're not of Pavita's story. So I don't understand how the canon event triggered, because it's not basically what I'm saying is that Miguel has this like perfect ideal method as to how canon events are supposed to go, and I understand that, but this event, the way the event triggered, just kind of puts a hole in it, because in your like algorithm it's not supposed to happen like that. And because of the way that the canon event triggered with Miles on the spot being there, I'm now thinking, is there just can't be one way that the events can go, because this is an alternate path to how a canon event can trigger. There isn't just one way that Miguel is presenting with like the whole multiverse being intact and there's only like this one solution to this problem. So now I'm thinking, is there actually one way, or is there actually multiple ways? And because the canon event was destructed, not complete, destructed, does that mean that canon event can happen again, or is it like a now or never situation? Okay, continuing to hate on Miguel, I don't like how he's blaming Miles for changing the story as if he had any hand in changing the story. Because he was just doing a spray painting business with his uncle and got bit by the spider, and then the events of the whole first film happened, didn't it? But obviously we watched the second film and we find out that the spider that bit him wasn't from his universe. That's why it was glitching in the first film when he went to see it again. It's from Earth 42. And how did he get it from Earth 42? He didn't get it from Earth 42, because the Spot took it from Earth 42 to 1610 and it bit Miles. Miguel also blames Miles for Pavita's dimension collapsing. Does he not see the massive like spot in the floor caused by the Spot? He went to Alchemax. Is it not the Spot who's destroying Mumbattan? Because I don't see it glitching the way that you glitched the other man's yard. Like, I'm sorry, the way that Miguel's dimension was collapsing and literally like crumbling into existence, it was not the same way it didn't happen the same way in Mumbai. Like, that shit was a blackhead, and it was sucking everything into it. Basically, what I'm saying is that I'm kind of annoyed that Miguel is blaming Miles, the recipient of the spider bite, rather than the Spot, who literally caused all of this. Looking at Miguel and listening to how he speaks about keeping the multiverse intact, telling his story about how he jumped into another version of himself's dimension, fast himself up in another man's family, and ended up killing everyone and his alternate daughter, I fail to believe that everyone, like, wholeheartedly 10 toes down, 100%, hand on the Bible, swear to God, believes in his theory. I just doubt it. Because his explanation of how he crumbled his dimension is kind of very vague. Like, he just said that he found another version of himself's family, and that version of himself died, so he replaced it. And then there's like this kind of like massive gap between the two. And then he just says like, yeah, I made the world disappear. And we're supposed to look at it and be like, yeah, those things correlate. Like, there might be some correlation to it, but whatever he is leaving out is that part. Because the information that he's giving to us is not enough to say that those things that you did led to your dimension crumbling. So with all of that, I've kind of come to the conclusion that I don't feel like those Spider-Men really, really believe that all the things that he's saying is true. I just feel like they have all like collectively bonded together in their like loss and trauma and hurt, that they have no other reason to believe it, because he is actually enforcing those people to go through those same traumas together, because hey, if one of you don't, all your universe is gonna die. Like, do you see that fear that is just invoked in you when you have like the choice between saving one person and millions and thousands of other people? It's just a really big clusterfuck of grief. And I feel like why Miguel is so hell-bent on getting Miles to agree to his methods is because I feel like Miguel sees himself in Miles's Spot. It's just that Miguel unknowingly knew the consequences of his actions. It obviously led to his dimension crumbling, and in his belief thinks that going against these ideals will lead to his dimension crumbling. So he's so hell-bent on kind of getting Miles to follow him, because he would not only be failing Miles, but he would be failing himself, because he would have had his own history repeated in front of him. But on the other side, it might be fear of Miles actually proving him wrong. Because imagine what happens if he does go to his dimension and he saves his dad and nothing happens. It would just be a huge like shake of Miguel's self, because he's led himself to believe that what he did crumbled his dimension. And if Miles was to go along and disprove that, it would literally crumble his sense of self. I don't know who the man would be at the end of the movie, but he's not going to be the same man he was at the start. Miles wants to do both. He wants to save his dad, and he wants to save the multiverse. And you know what? I'm rooting for him. Because taking how you look at it, he kind of already shows how he saves both. Because when he's getting the cakes for his dad's like party or something, he's writing like a note on one of them, and the lady's like, hey, this ain't gonna fit on the cake. So he's like, okay, let me get 2. And he brings those 2 cakes to the party, and when they're presented, they're kind of messed up. Like, give or take it, they're intact, but they're kind of messed up. So on one side, he is able to do both. But if we want to look at it a bit negatively, the cakes are kind of fucked. I'm not gonna lie to you, Miles. The cakes are kind of fucked. And with the cakes being destroyed, that might show that he might not be able to save them both, and maybe one of them might have to give. I'm sorry, it's a bit negative, but I don't know why. Maybe we need to be a little bit realistic. Maybe we always can't do both. Okay, so hear me out on this one. So when Miles and the Spot are having their first encounter, in the back there's like this little cutaway where it goes to a boy and a girl. A boy is wearing like a blue Spider-Man mask with like the red eyelets, and the girl is wearing a red Spider-Man mask with blue eyelets, right? Okay. And the boy looks at the fight that's happening, takes off his mask and says, I don't think I want this costume anymore. And in my head, when I saw that, I immediately looked at the boy and was like, that's Miguel. And it meant nothing in this movie, so it might mean something in the next movie. And I'm saying, hear me out, because it sounds insane, it sounds crazy. I might be reaching, but my arms are not tired. My feet are not exhausted. My head's turning. It might be turning a bit too quickly, but it might mean something. I'm not convincing myself because I know I'm right. It might mean something. Just hear me out. We saw the amount of foreshadowing that happened in the first movie. They're gonna do it again in this one, and this might just be the little piece. Because remember, Miguel isn't a villain, he's an anti-hero. His methods may be bad, but his overall intention is quite good. He's just a very jaded character. And my idea of what's going to happen to him in the next film is that people are going to turn on him, and he might resign from being the Spider like HQ Big Don Dada like like let's just say that Miles proves him wrong in the next film. I feel like this might be hinting to him giving up his role as Spider-Man. In the film, Mumbai isn't the only example of how a canon event can be broken, and I guess intentionally in the sense, because we see it with Gwen and her dad when they have a talk about him resigning as a police officer. Because we know one of the canon events that are crucial to this story is of a police officer close to Spider-Man dying. And the police officer closest to Gwen is her dad, Captain Stacy. But we see him resign, which means that he's no longer a police officer, which means he can't die, which means what happens to a canon event? Like, does it not just happen? Does it not happen? Like, what happens when it doesn't happen? Like, it can't happen. Because it can't. He's not a police officer anymore. Like, what do? We're just left in this limbo now. Miguel's literally put this do or die thing about the multiverse being like... Miguel's really hellbent on keeping the multiverse intact and making sure every Spider-Man goes through their canon event. But in this case, what happens when the canon event just can't happen at all? Like, what, is he gonna go to the man's yard and force him to reapply as a police officer? Like, I'm not gonna put that past him. He literally ran down a 15-year-old because he wanted to save his dad. Like, let have some compassion. And it's like, on top of that, because the canon event didn't happen, and because it didn't go through, by Miguel's explanation, her universe should be collapsing, shouldn't it? And I don't know if you and I saw the same movie, but her universe looks pretty intact to me. Like, I don't know, is there like a time limit on how quickly or how slowly a universe can collapse? Like, was it instantly for Miguel, or did it come in like 3 to 4 working days? Was it on a weekend? Was it a holiday? Was it a bank holiday? Like, how quickly can a universe like collapse? And is there like, I don't know, some kind of like chill time before it all just like disappears into thin air? Because her yard looks fine. Okay, so returning back to the part where Miguel explains the Spider-Verse to Miles, we see that he's made an algorithm that predicts events that could disrupt the multiverse. Like, he displays like the big tree thing, and he's like, all of our lives woven together in a beautiful web of life and destiny. He like displays the canon events and whatnot, and we can just say that this diagram is basically his whole like way of keeping track of the multiverse and like keeping it together. And I don't know if I've said this before, but I think all of that is trash. Okay, well, I wouldn't say it's necessarily trash, But from what I'm going to say, I'll say that his method isn't as efficient, I would say. Because in the first film, when we see Miles go to one of his lessons late, when he like first meets Gwen, he walks into the class and there's a video of Doc Ock in the back. And in it she says, every possibility we make would create countless other possibilities. A what if to infinity. Which makes sense. Obviously we know there isn't just one way a story can go. There are multiple different routes a story could have gone. There are multiple different paths, choices, things you could have done along the way that could have jeopardized the ending of the story or even made it better. You just wouldn't know because there are just so many different possibilities that could have happened that you can't just choose one way to go. And if you kind of understand that, you kind of get why I don't agree with Miguel, because he has a very like utilitarian way of leading, because he's more interested in the needs of others than the needs of one, because his whole goal is to maintain the multiverse, and he's maintaining the multiverse because of his own failures. And I can't wholeheartedly agree with him that maintaining the multiverse in his specific method is correct, because his story of how he destroyed it is so vague. And in addition, another little line that I picked up on as well was towards the right towards the end of the movie, when Peter and Gwen are putting Mayday to bed, and I think Peter asks how he should lead Mayday or something like that, or like how he should like take care of her and stuff. And I think it's a Gwen, maybe her name is MJ, I don't know, forgive me. She says, there's no playbook to raising someone like you or being someone like you. You just got to make the right adjustments. And I feel like that line not only talks to Miguel, but it also talks to Miles, because in Miguel's like perspective, the playbook is his arachno-humanoid poly thing. That's his playbook. That's the thing that he's trying to constrain. And as MJ says in this, there is no way to being someone like you. There's no playbook to it. There's no rules. You just got to make the right adjustments. And in Miles' perspective, he will make those adjustments. And those are all of my ideas up to this current point, I'd say right now. Do I have any ideas of what I think would happen in the next movie? Yes. One of them being that it's not going to be Miles' dad that's going to die. It's going to be his mum. And my friend hates this idea because I keep telling her, like, from when they kept, like, prefacing the importance about Miles' dad, like, something within me was just like, nah, they're going to kill his mum. They're going to kill his mum. And I'll tell you why. I have a little inkling that they might kill Rio off, because in both of the films now, we've seen that Miles has a stronger relationship with his mother rather than his dad. Because in the first film, their relationship was shaky, because we also saw the dichotomy between Jefferson and Uncle Aaron. And throughout that whole film, they were still quite shaky. And in this film, they're still quite shaky. They're still coming together. They're still working out. They're still talking. They're still bickering, actually. And Rio is probably one of the only people in the film that are really sticking by Miles, because when she has a little talk with him on the fire escape, like, you know, protect that little boy and everything. It's really, really heartfelt. Like, majority of the emotional scenes in that with Miles's mom, it just hit me in a way that just kind of like made me think that she is so important to Miles that she might just be that important to kill her off. Like, it might be a little bit dirty, but they might just kill her off to repair the relationship between him and his dad. Okay, so I've been hearing a lot of speculation about Miguel and what's going to happen to him in the next movie. And I'm hearing a lot of talk about him dying in the next film. And I'm not opposed to it. I'm not going to lie to you. Do I think it will happen? Maybe. Do I want it to happen? Not really. part of me doesn't really want it to happen because I feel like it would be a bit unfulfilling to an extent. But I kind of got to like realize that all the other like villains or like anti-heroes in the film have died. Like Doc Ock died, um, Pinball, Kingpin, Kingpin died. They have to meet some demise, and I don't know why, but part of me feels like he might have a redemption arc, as desperate as it sounds. But I think there was like a really like vague comment of someone saying that they kind of speculate that Miguel might sacrifice himself for the multiverse, and that is tearing me apart. With all the strikes that are happening and the recent news of the mistreatment of the animators when making Across the Spider-Verse, I feel like it would be highly unlikely to assume that the movie is going to come out next year. And even when they had first announced it, I kind of looked at it and I was like, how? Like, how? I feel like it's a really bold promise to make, and if they can make it, it's great. But I feel like they just need to understand that they don't need to rush. Like, Spider Verse has a really big fan base that have been waiting 5 years for the second movie. I feel like they can do another five for the next. It would be fine if we don't get in next year or the year after that. It would be even greater if the animators just could see their families. And I think that's the end of it now. So, yeah.